Ladies and gentlemen, from the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace and Justice, Deacon Gerald Celente.
Hello, this is Deacon Celente of the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace and Justice. And this week, of course, is another week of murder, of robbing us of our money to kill more people around the globe. And there were no protests. No, not in the United States, and very few around the world. It just came out this past week that, quote, Russia's invasion of Ukraine will cost the global economy $2.8 trillion in lost output by the end of next year, and even more if a severe winter leads to energy rationing in Europe, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development said on Monday. Well, they go on to say that Russia's attack has sparked a surge in energy prices that has weakened household spending and undermined businesses and their confidence, particularly in Europe. Yes, we are totally opposed to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We're for peace. We totally understand why it happened. But to say that Russia's attack has sparked a surge in energy prices is pure propaganda and an outright lie. It is the sanctions that the United States and NATO put on Russia and banning their gas and oil, of which Europe receives 40% of. And then Russia said, you could buy all you want, but you have to pay us in Russian rubles rather than US dollars. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to put more and more sanctions on you. And who's paying for it? The people, the businesses. This is a total lie. It's the sanctions that have done it. And it's making a very bad situation worse because we've gone from the COVID war to the Ukraine war and now into World War III. The COVID war made things terrible as to begin with, locking down businesses and destroying the lives and livelihoods of billions of people around the planet. So what are they doing? Rather than negotiating for peace, the Senate on Thursday, the United States Senate approved a funding bill that includes $16 billion of new aid to Ukraine. $16 more billion of we the people's money to go keep killing people and keep bloodying the killing fields in Ukraine rather than negotiating for peace. This $12.3 billion aid package will bring the total authorized for the United States to spend on the war in Ukraine, you ready for this? $67.5 billion. $67.5 billion since February 24th. While people are homeless, people living paycheck to paycheck in America, businesses going out of business, companies laying off employees by the thousands, yet building the war machine and ramping it up. The total military budget for Russia, by the way, in 2021 was $65.9 billion. So let's say $66 billion is Russia's entire military budget, the United States already sent $67.5 billion. They've sent more money to Ukraine to keep blooding the killing fields than the entire Russian budget. So you have protests going on, particularly in the Czech Republic. A few weeks ago, some 70,000 people took to the streets. And this past week, on Wednesday, hundreds, they don't give the exact number, but probably another 70, 80,000 took to the streets again. And they're blaming the sanctions that the government put on Russia for these heavy energy prices that are costing the people so much money. And they're saying, well, this isn't our war. Why you keep ramping it up? And why is it you're taking the money from us to make it more bloody? And the prices of everything going up. But there are no protests in America. Barely nothing. And again, we held the Peace and Freedom rally here in Kingston, New York on July 23rd of this year. We had about 400 or 500 people up here. That's it. And no media coverage at all, despite sending out thousands of press releases over the course of 3 weeks. Peace is not allowed. Only war. Only war. The war criminal, who's the Republican leader over there, Mitch McConnell, that loved every war America's ever had, and a man that never fought in war, but loves to send other people to go die. And by the way, the number of Americans that served in the military, over 20 a day are committing suicide. That's right. That have served because they saw the disastrous things they were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. McConnell called for the U.S. to provide Ukraine with, quote, more tanks, fighting vehicles, longer-range rockets, artillery, and air defense systems, more HIMARS, HIMARS, more drones, and preparatory training in Western fighter aircraft, end quote. And the people applaud. That's on the war front, and it's only getting worse because they blew up the Nord Stream pipelines. And we have warned that there would be a false flag or a nuclear event that would spark World War III. It's already begun, but it hasn't become official. It will become official when there's a major false flag event or a nuclear strike. And they're actually blaming the Russians on blowing up their own pipelines, and they're saying they may not be able to repair them, and saying they're doing this so they don't have to send oil and gas into Russia. And people believe it. Just like people believed that Russians were bombing the nuclear plant that they took over in Ukraine as they had their troops there. That they were actually bombing the place where their own troops were, and that they're actually blowing up their own pipeline. They're not pumping gas. They're not pumping hardly any gas, about 25% of what was going into Russia before, into Europe before. And they could shut the valve off anytime they want. They don't have to blow it up. But that's the propaganda and the lies. Just like the lies that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. And they call Putin a war criminal, but they don't call the murderer George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and Wolfowitz And all the others that lied us into the Iraq war, they're not war criminals. America could slaughter people all over the world as they have since the end of World War II. That's okay. But Russia, in their battle with Ukraine, because one of the issues was, and not in the US or Western media at all, was that the Ukrainians killed over 15,000 people in the Donbass region that Putin and the people voted for, that's now a separatist region. That was going on right before Russia invaded, but that doesn't make the news. So the Ukrainians could kill, the Americans can't kill, but Russia, they're war criminals. And again, we're totally opposed to the war, totally opposed to the war and Russia's invasion. Totally. But bad situations are becoming much worse. We have warned that when the COVID war began and people across the globe lost their lives and livelihoods because of the damage of the lockdowns, that they're now blaming, quote, on the pandemic rather than the politicians that imposed them. We said that when people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. This is an article in this week's Wall Street Journal. More retailers lock down items to deter theft. They go on to say, it's a sign of an endemic challenge for retailers, how to stop theft without shrinking profits or inconvenience to shoppers. Retailers have long dealt with theft, and they go on to say, but theft attempt levels are higher than they were before the pandemic. No, not before the pandemic. Before the lockdowns that were illegally imposed by dictators that people call politicians, that made up their political science and not a scintilla of hard science or hard data to support them. But they're blaming it on the pandemic. Again, when people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it, we said. And now they're losing it big time. And as I said, they made up this stuff. Canada eases COVID-19 rules. Canadian officials said the repeal is possible, blah, 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 blah. Canadian officials, not scientific data, officials. Remember, when you're in an airplane, you must wear a mask, but you could eat and drink without the mask on. Because, of course, the virus knows when you're eating and drinking, it won't bother you. And you must stand 1 meter apart and draw circles on the floor and sit people 1 meter apart, because the virus goes in straight lines, the 6 feet. The wind doesn't blow up or down or around. They made up this moronic stuff and imposed their dictatorial powers on the people as we've lost our freedom. And it's getting worse. Now masks have become a part of everyday life. Go to the doctor. Go to the dentist. You must wear a mask. But of course, you could take it off when they work on your teeth. What idiocy. What fear, what hysteria has been sold to us by the conglomerates that people call mainstream media. 6 companies in America control over 90% of all the media in the country. They tell you what they want to tell you, and you must do what they tell you to do. and people believe it. 40% of COVID recovery funds in developing nations went to big companies, not the people, and especially not the poorest people. And that's according to Financial Transparency Coalition. The coalition also found that 1/3 less money was spent in pandemic relief last year compared to 2020. Again, pandemic relief. No, dictatorial relief. The worst is yet to come. If we don't unite for peace and freedom, we are going to die in war. When all else fails, they take you to war, and the global economies are failing because of the mandates they imposed on we the people to fight the COVID war, and now the sanctions they imposed on Russia to fight the Ukraine war. What are you doing to change it? What are you doing to change it? What are you doing to change it? Or do you just take orders and follow their orders? Are you still in grammar school? Maybe you're in high school and you have to listen to the principal. Why, I'm the principal and I'll tell you what to do. Why, I'm the governor and I'll tell you what to do. Why, I am the president and I'll tell you what to do. Or are you a free human being to live in peace and freedom in the higher order of the God that you believe in? So please do what you can, if you believe in the God that you believe in, for peace and freedom, and give what you can to the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace, and Justice, freedompeaceandjustice.com. We're doing everything we can to stop this madness before we keep living hell on earth. People are building bomb shelters. What, do you want to live after a nuclear bomb is exploded? Who'd want to live a life after that? In a bomb shelter underground? So please do what you can. United we stand, divided we die. Thank you, and amen, and amen.